Two very different fragrances from the same brand. Let's see if there's some tie-in. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is a first impression comparison between two fragrances from the brand of Marc-Antoine Barrois. One is Tilia, the other one is Encelade. In this video format, I compare and give my first impressions on two fragrances, usually in sample form. Then I chose to cover a specific topic. This is not a fragrance battle. We're not here to decide which of the two fragrances is better. We're here to talk about the wear experience and to open the conversation. You guys have been recommending these two fragrances in the comment section of my videos for way too long, and I guess it's finally time to tackle these two. I've actually been sitting on these samples for a super long time. We're talking almost a year, so I'm hoping that these samples did not go bad. Anyway, today we're going to be tackling two fragrances from the house of Marc-Antoine Barrois. As I mentioned in my introduction, one is Tilia, the other one is Encelade. I'm fully aware that these two fragrances are supposed to be incredibly different. On one side, Tilia is supposed to be some sort of a summer spring scent, very floral, very effervescent and light. On the other side, we have Encelade. I'm not really sure what this is supposed to be, but based on the notes, based on what I read online, this is a weird leather fragrance which is super powered. All that I know about this fragrance is that the general performance, which is including projection and longevity, is supposed to be absolutely insane. Myself, I'm not super keen on massively performing fragrances, specifically in the longevity department. Fragrances that don't evolve much past the dry down, that stay in that dry down phase for way too long, can become very fatiguing, especially if they're packed full of synthetics, which I kind of expect these two fragrances to be. That is because they are perfumed by a very special perfumer, Quentin Biche, and that is because I have sampled other fragrances from the brand of Marc-Antoine Barrois. And the fragrances from the brand are very cool, they're very experimental, they're borderline niche, we'll get to that in a sec, but they do smell kind of synthetic. And not necessarily synthetic in a bad way, maybe just more purposefully synthetic. We see artificial components geared to really emphasize the avant-garde, space-age nature of these scents. And I'm saying these, but actually I'm referring to the first two releases from the brand of Marc-Antoine Barrois, the most celebrated ones. One is B683, the other one is clearly the most popular from the brand, that one there being Ganymede. And I feel that at this point, Ganymede, it's almost its own brand. You don't really associate it to the house of Marc-Antoine Barrois, you don't really associate it to the other fragrances. There's clearly a connection scent-wise, at least for the ones that I've sampled, but it's almost its own entity. It's so extremely popular, so ingrained in the modern niche fragrance culture that it's its own thing. It's so weird. And the brand itself is actually not necessarily niche, not by conventional standard definitions, because the brand is producing clothing. So it actually is more of a designer brand. Now, we could talk about this at infinity, but somehow they're kind of designed to smell also mass appealing and likable. And the massive popularity of Ganymede is definitely a testament to that. These fragrances smell experimental. They have this weird character, this weird edgy personality, which is quite niche. These fragrances definitely stand out from the sea of designers out there. So yeah, in my opinion, Marc-Antoine Barrois is definitely a niche fragrance brand. And before I mentioned the perfumer Quentin Biche, and indeed he perfumed the whole line, he perfumed the whole catalog by Marc-Antoine Barrois. And you might know that Quentin Biche, when it comes to homage, is not really my favorite perfumer. I don't think that his style really fits the brand, but when it comes to more experimental space-age stuff like this, a little bit more synthetic or intentionally synthetic, his style really fits the bill. I feel that he's the best perfumer to create something like Ganymede. Ganymede really showcases Biche's ability to inject synthetics in a sexy modern way, which is incredibly unique. And by now, at this point, you might even be tired of Ganymede. You might be tired of smelling that very specific scent profile, because that DNA has been overused to oblivion in these last years. Nonetheless, Ganymede is a masterpiece. I think that it will stand the test of time. It's a very unique fragrance with a unique personality. Again, it has this edginess, which is really unheard of. Nothing before Ganymede ever smelled like that, and it brings synthetics to a more commercial use case. It brings synthetics in a more unapologetic way up front on the market. I love that stuff. I love experimental perfumery. And again, I really have to applaud Quentin Biche in this aspect, because his work for the brand of Marc-Antoine Barrois is absolutely stellar. All that out of the way, and also considering that I've never smelled these in my life, what are my expectations for these two? Well, for Tilia, I've heard great things. I'm expecting this to be a nice, fresh, zingy floral. I'm also expecting to be kind of anosmic to this because I distinctly remember one of the notes being ambroxan. And if you know me, I don't really smell ambroxan. I detect it as the smell of canned air. I do detect something in the air. I detect some sort of volume to the point where I do call it empty volume. So I'm really hoping that this one here will be detectable to my nose. I'm hoping that this will have some punch and staying power. Now, when it comes to Encelade, I'm not really sure what to expect. I'm kind of fearful that it's going to be smelling a little bit rubbery, a little bit plasticky. Some people are comparing this to Nudiflorum by Nasomatto, so maybe it might be in that ballpark. And Nudiflorum has a very plasticky latex leather, which is fun. But if this is persistent as people say it is, it might be kind of a nightmare. Before we get into actual sampling, let me just very quickly remind you how this format works. I'll be spraying these two fragrances first on paper to really simulate the idea of wearing them on clothes. This might be a bad idea because wearing these two very powerful fragrances on clothes might be a permanent solution, so I don't necessarily recommend it. Then I'll be applying them on skin. I'll be talking about my very first impressions, talking about the opening, giving my background with the house or my experience with the house, and then I'll be stepping away. I'll be stepping away for 2 to 3 hours, then I'll be coming back to talk about the dry down, to discuss the overall wear experience, and to give my expectations on longevity, use cases, and overall value for money. All right, enough chatter, let's get right to it. As I just mentioned, I'll be spraying Tilia first on paper, I'll be spraying Encelade on paper, and then moving on to skin. So Tilia on paper, let's give it one spray, because these might be pretty potent, so I don't want to overwhelm myself from the start. Tilia. I can already smell it in the air, by the way. And one tiny spray on this little tiny piece of paper is already radiating through this room. All right, this is actually kind of what I was expecting. It's very, very beautiful. It's very light. It has this summery feeling. It smells very floral. It smells like, I'm not really sure what floral it smells like. I know what this is supposed to smell like because Tilia assumingly is a linden blossom scent, and even the name Tilia, when grossly morphed into Italian, into Tilio, that is the name of the linden tree. So I guess it all kind of checks out, but I have to fully admit I'm not super familiar with the smell of linden blossom. I do remember my parents having linden blossom trees in the garden, but I don't associate any smell to them. This is very, very pretty. It's floral. It has white and yellow floral connotations. It also has this weird sweetness to it, which is almost reminding me of honey or maybe something like pollen. It's sweet in a very realistic way, but at the same time, the scent almost comes across as synthetic. Again, I might be biased by the fact that it's a Marc-Antoine Barrois. I might be biased by the fact that it's a Quentin Biche, but it does smell kind of weird. It has this weird radiance about it, which is really pushing off the strip. It's really invading this room space, and that does not smell really natural. This smells synthetically boosted. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. In this case, I actually feel that it's a good thing because this smell on its own would be incredibly subtle, and this synthetic compound, whatever it is really helping the scent fill out. Fairly stable, fairly predictable. I'm not really getting much else. It has this dewiness, which is really seductive. I feel that it's very attractive. This would make for an amazing spring scent because this is like spring in a bottle. It feels floral. It feels like fresh floral blooming. I'm picturing this deep green color possibly associated to the leaves of the linden tree. And although the scent doesn't necessarily smell green, I do associate that color to lush vegetation, to nice spring bloom. This is really, really pretty. And I think that it's absolutely unisex. Again, it might be stereotypically feminine because it's a very direct floral, but the floral in here is fairly abstract, and I actually think that the synthetic note is helping to break the imagery. It's making it more of a rendition of a floral rather than an actual flower. So it's not too feminine. I would totally pull this off. This would be a really great scent in the summer, in the spring, a daily wear at the office. It's super clean, and it has that definite Quentin Biche vibrance to it. It's very detectable in the air. It has immense push. Super pretty. All right, I think I'm done with this because I'm not really detecting anything else, and it feels fairly stable. Let's move on to Encelade because this video is already going along as is. Encelade, the one spray on paper. Bad atomizer. All right, I gave it 2 just because the atomizer was kind of clogged, and maybe it's because of the sample. Maybe it's old, but whatever. Wow, very, very different. I don't know. This smells sweet and rich and powerful. So sweet in a way that is kind of off-putting. I have to say off the bat, I'm not enthusiastic. I'm not really sure how to describe this, but it's like a combination of sweet, caramelized, and smoky and leathery at the same time. It's weird. Yeah, so my fears were pretty much founded. This is very plasticky, it's very rubbery. Now, it's not like I hate this type of note. I actually find fragrances with this scent profile kind of interesting. They can be very edgy and experimental. I'm just kind of scared of the assumed longevity of this because people say it's an absolute beast and it's eternal. So if this fragrance holds on to that plastic rubbery thing in the long run, it might be a strong no for me. But for now, I just want to keep an open mind. I still don't know what this smells like. Again, it has this sweet, rubbery, smoky leather thing. It's definitely not your stereotypical leather. I'm not picturing any leather garment, any piece of leather, any leather accessory. It does not have any grittiness. It does not have any grain or texture. It feels smooth, like some sort of faux leather, like a pleather. What does this smell like? It does kind of remind me of Nudiflorum, actually. But Nudiflorum had this insane, massive flower note, which was really overwhelming this aspect of the fragrance. This is like pure plasticky leather. Interestingly enough, the name Encelade, or rather Encelados, is tied to Greek mythology. Apparently he was a giant which was buried under a mountain after a battle with the gods. Some say in Sicily, some say under the Mount Etna, which is actually an active volcano. So yes, I guess this is supposed to be inspired by a volcano, by the fiery power and smokiness of a volcano. But Encelade is also a moon of Saturn, so we have that experimental extraterrestrial component, possibly in the form of this plasticky note. This scent is, once again, very, very stable. It's very similar to Tilia in this regard. I'm not really finding a ton of complexity. It feels like Ganymede. I mean, Ganymede is a beautiful scent. It has a lot of character, but also that one there is fairly one note. It's a very slow transitioning scent, given its synthetic background. And even B683 is a very stable, very predictable scent, which stays that way for a super, super long time. Such a weird scent to describe, so difficult to identify. I don't even remember the notes for this, but I kind of seem to recall that there's maybe citrusy components in the top. And maybe it's those citruses that are giving this a little bit of sweetness. Maybe it's the citruses which are kind of fighting the smoke, creating this burnt aftertaste in my mouth. All right, I think I'm done for now. Let's move on to skin. Let's start off with Tilia on skin. Let's give it one good spray. Close up. Again, these fragrances are very, very potent. It's not like I'm scared of them, but I really don't want the smells to overlap, so I'm going to keep it to one spray. This one here, Encelade, I'll give 2 sprays because the atomizer is just that bad. Yeah, it's not even spraying, so I give it like 3. I'm not really sure. I created a similar puddle on my arm. All right, on to Tilia. Tilia on my skin is similar, but it's even more sweet, it's more honey-like. It's so weird because this smell alone comes across as very delicate and subtle, it's very, very timid, but this scent has a definite power, has a definite push to it, which makes it kind of jarring. Again, it's not jarring in a bad way, it's just very strange. You kind of detach from the idea of a floral. Yeah, on skin it's definitely a lot sweeter than on paper. It has a very front and center honey component to the point where it's almost reminding me a little bit of Zoologist Bee. And that one there is a lot more rich, it's a lot more complex and multi-layered, but it has a similar connotation to Tilia. They're both very effervescent, very bright florals with a deep honey component, which is almost pollen-like. This one here, though, has no animalics whatsoever. It comes across as soapy clean. Again, I can't detach from the picture of green, like green leaves beating in the wind. This nice warm afternoon wind, possibly from summer. I'm not really sure, but the image is very, very clear. And I can't detach from the power of this. I can smell it in the air as I wave my arm around with that little tiny spray. So the performance of this is expected to be absolutely amazing. And the scent itself is really, really beautiful. I do really like it. I do really enjoy that scent profile. Let's try Encelade. Full transparency, not really for me, still not really my scent profile. That latex rubber component is front and center and very invasive. Still, I want to keep an open mind. I want to keep this as objective as possible. I would have to say that the sweetness, that weird sweetness from the citruses is being toned down a lot. Maybe it is from the citruses and my skin, notoriously known for killing acidity, is eating up those citruses. On the flip side though, as my skin tends to darken everything up, as it tends to warm everything up, that smoky component, which was previously hiding in the base, is really starting to emerge. It still smells really burnt, it still smells like rubber, it smells like molten plastic, but it's starting to resemble leather more and more. And if I really, really squint, I'm getting images of, dare I say it, Tuscan leather or maybe even ombre nomade. It has the same weird, sweet leather thing, which is gritty, which is a little bit stinky. Again, I have to squint real hard to even imagine leather, but I think that it's kind of going in that direction. It feels like this puddle of molten plastic, which is still kind of red and hot, and it's kind of fuming, and there's something leather in there, maybe some sort of a piece of leather that has caught fire. It's very volcano-like, I have to give it that. It smells like a modern experimental interpretation of lava. Again, it's too sweet to be lava. It's really, really strange. And this scent kind of comes across as fairly one-dimensional. It doesn't really have a lot of layers. It doesn't have a lot of details. It doesn't have a lot of ingredients. The image that it's depicting is fairly flat. Everything is really lacking three-dimensionality. And this is also true for Tilia, by the way. I'm still smelling it in the air. It's fairly one-dimensional. I feel that here, specifically, you're trading off maybe lasting power for detail, and that's absolutely fine. Again, Marc-Antoine Barrois is not necessarily about uber complexity. And yes, these might be simple, but I wouldn't necessarily call these pedestrian, shallow, or even safe, especially Encelade. This is an absolute bomb. These are designed to depict a very simple image, but with a lot of power. Tilia is, by the way, absolutely glorious. Again, I smell it in the air, and it's still very fresh, very effervescent, very floral. The honey-like component, that sweetness, is a little bit toning down. It's a little bit more natural smelling, I would have to say, but it's still very, very radiant, and I'm expecting great longevity from this. The ambroxan component is there. It might be giving the scent a lot of push, but I'm not necessarily anosmic to it. It's not like I'm smelling nothing. I don't really smell that empty volume sort of thing. Encelade, on the other hand, pun intended, remains very rich, very dark, and very dense. I was not expecting something like this, at least not to this degree. And actually, this smoky bitterness is almost sort of covering up this plasticky rubbery thing, or maybe it's just my brain trying to phase it out as I'm not a fan of the scent profile. Nonetheless, it's smelling more and more like this molten concoction of leather and plastic and just tar. It smells like a bubbling pool of tar or petrol, something very dark with a little bit of a glow from the heat. I'm kind of adjusting to it. It's still not my thing. It still has a little bit of that rubberiness, but it's getting better and better. Again, it might be my brain. Anyway, I think that it's time to take a break. It's time to step away. I'll see you in a couple of hours. And we are back. So, it's been 2.5 hours. I've had dinner, and these things were both very distracting. I have to say, first and foremost, the work experience for these is pretty intense, even with just 2 sprays. Every time I would wave my hands around, I would get whiffs of Encelade specifically. I feel that in general, the work experience for Encelade was completely suffocating Tilia to the point where to smell the scent, I would have to get close to my skin. Everything was kind of mixing together, but Encelade was definitely the most powerful one, was definitely the one that was invading my personal space. And this is pretty crazy because I didn't apply much, and this is kind of unusual for this sort of video. When I wear fragrances like this with very little sprays on my arms, I don't usually get a ton of projection. I don't get a ton of sillage, especially long lasting like this, especially so consistent and persistent. So I feel that it's fairly safe to say that when it comes to performance regarding longevity and projection, both these two scents will definitely not give you anything to worry about. They're both very powerful, they're very radiant, they really push off the skin and create this massive scent bubble, especially Encelade. So yeah, unless they magically fade off after hour 4, which I doubt, these will be extremely long lasting, probably easily covering a full days of work, a full days of wear. That being said, these scent profiles prove to be fairly unsurprising. They really haven't evolved much, they really haven't transitioned much. They started out simple and they remain very, very simple. Let's start out with Tilia on paper. Tilia on paper smells exactly like Tilia when I first sprayed it on. It's very, very detectable, it's very powerful, very radiant, and still very diffusive. As I wave the thing around, I can easily smell it. It's just exactly the same. Again, incredibly persistent, incredibly durable. I have no doubt in my mind that when applied to clothes, this would be extremely long-lasting, borderline eternal. That being said, this is actually a kind of scent profile that you want to apply to your clothes because it smells very, very clean. It makes your garments almost smell freshly washed. It's so beautiful, so clean, so radiant, so uplifting. This really puts me in a good mood. It's also very synthetic. The more I'm smelling this, the more I can't detach from that synthetic feeling. It doesn't really smell natural in the sense that there's something about it which is too saturated. This smells like a flower photograph, but with the contrast and saturation just cranked all the way up. If you know what HDR is, this kind of smells like the idea of those early 2000s HDRs. It has this weird synthetic thing about this. It's realistic, but not really. It's not bad. Again, I'm not bashing the synthetic aspect. I feel that it really aids the performance. I feel that it really aids the power and the overall presence of this, but it's not a natural smelling scent. It's just not. This does not smell like a Les Indemodables. Anyway, let's move on to Tilia on skin. Again, still very persistent, surprisingly persistent given how light the scent profile is overall, but the sweetness has toned down significantly. I still get that very vivid floral image, almost oversaturated once again, but it's much warmer, it's much more dense, it feels more intimate. Not that the scent is lacking performance or projection by any stretch of the imagination, it just feels more close, like I'm looking at the flower from more up close. It's almost a little bit powdery, it has this texture to it, it's almost... Again, it's almost like picking flowers and touching the petals. They have this very subtle velvety texture to them. Smells fresh, but not necessarily in terms of scent profile because it has this sweet warmth, which is very appealing. It smells fresh in terms of freshly picked flowers. They feel watery, they smell dewy. It's very nice, very, very clean, very polite, very subtle. At the same time, it has this incredible push, which is strange. Again, it's a beautiful scent. I would definitely pull this off on the daily in the summer and spring, possibly even in the fall, because again, it's so joyful. It really puts me in a good mood. And yeah, I really can't bang it. It's a beautiful scent. And I'm actually thinking about maybe possibly getting a bottle. I'm not really sure how much I would wear this because if this is really powerful, I tend to prefer trading off power for nuances and details. So maybe Les Indemodables or Guerlain would be much more up my alley. But I'm not sure that they have a linden blossom scent. Nothing that smells exactly like this. This is very, very pretty and I can't fully vouch for it. Now let's move on to Encelade, first on strip. Yeah, this one too, Encelade on paper smells exactly like when I sprayed it. It's very sweet, almost cloying, and very plasticky and rubbery. I really do not dig this scent profile, especially on paper. It's really not my thing. It's super one-dimensional and it's completely lacking any nuance or detail. It's just cloying to me. Maybe I'm sick of it, maybe I'm sick of smelling it around me, but yeah, this is really not for me. Thankfully though, on skin it's much better. because it has significantly toned down, not necessarily toned down in power because it's extremely powerful, so much so that it's all that I'm smelling, but it's toned down in terms of aggression, in terms of smokiness, in terms of plasticness, in terms of sheer volume of the individual ingredients. This now smells a lot more like leather. It's turning into leather. It smells like that molten plastic thing that I was talking about before that has kind of cooled down, and for whatever reason, that concoction cooling down just turned into this piece of leather. It's a lot more dry, it's a lot more grainy and textured. It feels more gritty, it feels more brittle. But it still has a little bit of this sheen, maybe from the plastic, maybe from the rubber. There's something in there which is still giving off this plasticiness about it. It feels kind of extraterrestrial, meaning that it doesn't really feel natural at all. So it doesn't really feel like a volcano, it doesn't really feel like fire. It feels like some sort of a man-made compound which has been utilized for its strength and persistence. Like again, some sort of a nylon or some sort of a plastic which has a distinct weird smell. It might not be the right example because it doesn't really smell like that specifically, but it feels like opening a package that has been containing this synthetic garment, maybe a pair of waterproof boots or some sort of a jacket with this very tough material. It feels like this molten process has given birth to this very special resilient compound, which is kind of resembling leather, but it's really not. It's lacking completely any kind of natural aspect that leather has. It's lacking any sort of animalic facet, and it's lacking this organic property that leather has. I have to say the scent has grown on me a little bit, maybe by forced exposure, but I would never buy the scent whatsoever. It's way too powerful, way too persistent, way too invasive. It's not a smell that I want to smell all the time, also because it's fairly one note. Again, it's like a song playing this bass line which is the same. It feels very repetitive. I get it, if you like the scent profile, this might be your ultimate scent because it is playing that thing over and over again, and it is very, very powerful. This one here will definitely be a nose catcher. This one here will have people turning around. But it's just not my scent profile. I'm not into it. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's something about it which is kind of turning me off. I'd rather go for a pure leather scent, like Tuscan leather, like Ombre Nomade. And dare I say, even Ombre Nomade, as powerful as that one is, I still prefer it to this. Ombre Nomade was obnoxiously powerful to the point where I had to trade it off, but I'd rather wear that 100 times to 1 because this one here has the same sort of power, the same sort of projection, but it just makes me uncomfortable. It makes me almost anxious. Again, this rubbery component is kind of uncanny. And again, please take all of this with a grain of salt, a massive grain of salt, because this is still my opinion, and I am very sensitive to this sort of scent profile. So it might totally work for you. If this sounds interesting, this is an absolute beast of a fragrance that you might really, really enjoy. Now, when it comes to Tilia, it's kind of the same thing. I do recommend it. I do really love it. But at the same time, it is a very specific, very polarizing scent profile. If you're not into florals, if you're not into those spring bright florals, this one here will not be for you. It's the same kind of idea. They have the same similar wear experience, but one is smoky and dark and rich, and the other one is airy, floral, and sweet. Similar, different, kind of connected. I'm actually kind of surprised because these videos are born out of nowhere. I often find myself comparing two fragrances that on paper have absolutely nothing in common. But surprisingly enough, by wearing two scents like this, you find yourself analyzing the single scent a lot more because you're comparing it relative one to another, and you learn a lot. And this has been super interesting, as it is always. And actually, I have a ton of respect for the brand of Marc-Antoine Barrois. I do think that the fragrances are very experimental, very edgy, and very peculiar. And I found that all of the fragrances that I tested from the brand have something in common. Obviously, they share the same DNA. To a degree, they share almost the same scent profile because they are perfumed by the same guy and they're from the same brand. But mostly, they share the same purpose. They have the same idea. They share the same brand identity. identity. And this is actually something that I massively respect. So full kudos to Marc-Antoine Barrois. They come across as incredibly solid. They know what they are, they know exactly what they're putting out, and they know exactly who they're targeting. So if you're one of those people, one of those users that likes powerful synthetic scents with a purpose, these might be exactly what you're looking for. Also, if you're one of those people that likes avant-garde, experimental, exotic scents with a little bit of an outwardly experience, these are also for you. They're very powerful, they're very recognizable, they're very, very punchy, again, long-lasting. And funnily enough, these, despite all the quirky features of the scent profiles, come across as surprisingly mass appealing, surprisingly likable. I would dare to say that you can probably daily each one of these scents. You can probably signature scent these without any issues. Again, they're very, very potent, so you might have to dose down the sprays, but they have this scent profile which is modern and kind of mass appealing. At the same time, it's very niche and experimental. Again, super cool house. I highly recommend it. And specifically B683, Ganymede, those are staples. These two are absolutely amazing. I strongly prefer Tilia, but Encelade has its own character. It has its own personality that I have to respect. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. Many more first impressions on the horizon. See you in the next one, and cheers.